Novo Escalante, and today we are going to tackle about the components of quantitative item analysis. But before that, let's make an overview about quantitative item analysis. So, according to Miss Tricia Dayan Barcenas, quantitative item analysis is the process of evaluating test items using statistical data from students' responses. It helps teachers and test developers determine how well each question performs in terms of difficulty, discrimination, and the quality of distractors. So, this is another definition of quantitative item analysis. It is a method used by teachers and test makers to evaluate the quality of test items based on how students respond to them. It helps ensure that assessment tools are fair, valid, and effective in measuring what students really know and can do. So, here are the key components of the quantitative item analysis. These are the three main tools help us analyze test items: the difficulty index, the discrimination index, and the distractor analysis. Each tells us something different about how well our test questions are functioning. So, I am tasked to teach you about the difficulty index. But before that, let's have an activity. Please post this or take a screenshot to answer, and I want you to pass it on Friday on a 1/4 sheet of paper. So here is the instructions. Below are 3 science questions. Read each one carefully and decide which is the easiest and which is the item most difficult based on your own thinking. There is no right or wrong answer, just your opinion. Then, explain why you choose your answers. After this lesson, you should be able to recall why the difficulty index matters, compute it, and interpret it to classify questions as very easy, moderate, difficult, or very difficult. So I want you to think about it. Have you ever encountered some test questions that seem so easy while others feel almost impossible? And how teachers actually measures that? Please think of an answer, and on Friday I am going to ask some of you to answer this. So be ready. So, a teacher administered a 20-question multiple choice test on basic chemistry concepts to her class. After grading, the teacher noticed that the following results. The first 10 questions were answered correctly by 80 of students on average, and the last 10 questions had an average correct answer rate of 40%. What can the teacher infer about the difficulty of these two sets of questions? Next is, what does difficulty index really means? In simple words, difficulty index means it measures how easy or hard a test item is. It is also called a p-value. and it ranges from 0, which is very hard, to 1, which is very easy. Next, I'm going to show you the index range for level of difficulty. So, if the p-value is 0.81 to 1.00, the interpretation is very easy. And if the p-value is 0.61 to 0.80, it is interpreted as easy. Then 0.41 to 0.60, moderate. And 0.21 to 0.40 is difficult. And 0.00 and to 0.20 is interpreted as very difficult. So here is the formula of difficulty index, which is P is equal to R over T, where R is the number of students who got it right, then T is the total number of students. A good item usually falls between 0.41 and 0.60. Let's go back here. A teacher administered the 20-question multiple choice test. The first 10 questions were answered correctly by 80% of students on average, and next, the last 10 questions had an average correct answer rate of 40%. So in the first half of a test has 80% correct answer, and the second half only have 40%. So the teacher can infer the half is easier. The teacher can infer the first half is easier, and this data can help us revise or balance our test items. Next is the criterion reference test. High scores are good. When high scores are good, it means learning happened. But in norm reference test, we want a mix of easy, moderate, and hard items to spread out students' scores. So according to James Popham, criterion reference testing is the goal is to measure whether students have mastered specific learning objectives. Therefore, if most students get an item correct, that is not a problem. It actually shows successful teaching and learning. So, doon mo ma-assess kung ano ba talaga yung natutunan ng student. Take note of this word, the successful teaching and learning. It shows successful teaching and learning. And a high difficulty index is acceptable in criterion reference test if it aligns with the intended outcomes. Example, if all students correctly answer the question a well-thought topic, it affirms learning, not poor item quality. That is according to James Popham. Next is according to Cuisine. The difficulty must be judged based on the purpose of testing. In norm reference tests, which aim to differentiate students' items, should fall in moderate difficulty range, to spread out scores. If an item is too easy or too hard, it contributes less to separating high and low performance. So, in norm reference tests, too many easy items reduce scores variability and make ranking unreliable. So, this is the summary table of Popham's interpretation and Cuisine's interpretation. Take time to read and understand. Next is I'm going to introduce to you the factors that make a test item easy. You can say that the test item is easy if it is only a direct recall, or there are clue words frequently discussed or practiced, and there are overly familiar examples, simplified wordings, and obvious distractors. The action is we should consider revising the item to increase challenge, to combine it with higher ordered thinking questions. So I have here an example of easy question. What is the chemical symbol for water? So the chemical symbol for water is H2O. It is just a simple recall because all of us has a stock knowledge or prior knowledge about this question, and it is very basic. Next is the factor that make a test item moderate, or the p-value of the moderate is 0.41 to 0.60. The moderate item covers essential learning competencies, require basic understanding plus application, well-constructed distractors, clear but not overly obvious language, applies knowledge to new but familiar situations, balanced cognitive load, not too easy, not too complex. The action, these are ideal items. So in making a multiple choice or item analysis questions, the moderate is the ideal items. This often retained for summative tests and item banks. This is the example of a moderate test or multiple choice. Which of the following best explains why metals conduct electricity? So the answer is metals have free moving electrons. The question is not too easy and not too difficult, and it wants us to use our critical thinking skills. Next factor is that make a test item difficult. The p-value is 0.00 to 0.40. In making test item difficult, they use ambiguous wording or trick questions. It is too much information or too technical vocabulary, misalignment with the learning objectives or lessons taught, cognitive overload, combining too many skills in one item, unfamiliar context not discussed in class, poor distractor quality, or all seems equally correct or vague. And the action we should need the, to do is these items need review, simplify, reword, or align with what was taught. This is the example of difficult question. In the context of quantum mechanics and molecular orbital theory, which of the following best describes the localization of the electrons in aromatic compounds? So in this example, they use ambiguous words and it has too much information, and it has unfamiliar context, and when we read it, we will have a cognitive overload. So, if many items are easy, the action we need to do is to revisit learning targets. Are they too low? Or increase rigor in lessons and assessments? Do they need to add more application and analysis level items? If the many items are moderate, it maintains balance in item difficulty. It also reinforces teaching strategies used, and it used as a benchmark for future tests. And if many items are difficult, they can identify the topics with low performance. They can reteach or remediate those concepts. They can review item construction for clarity, or they can provide scaffolding or simplified steps in future instructions. So here is another activity which is called test item analysis instructions. Compute the p-values. Compute the p-values. Next, interpret difficulty. Is it very easy, moderate, very difficult, and very difficult? Then recommend whether to revise or retain the item. Write report in any paper or